I don't know if you've noticed, but I tend to use the word grace a lot. Yes, I know you've noticed this. It's the title of this podcast, for crying out loud. And I've named my dog about it. And I use it all the time. But I got to thinking, there's so much that goes into the word grace. And I would love to delve into that a little bit more. Unfortunately, I don't feel like I have the spiritual wisdom or knowledge to really offer that to you. Today, I have invited my dear friend, Emily Baker, onto the show so she can help us understand the depth and the breadth of grace. This is such a rich and thorough conversation. I know you're really going to savor it. Stick around. Hey there, I'm Amy Connell, and welcome to the Graced Health podcast. I'm a certified personal trainer who wants you to know your eating, movement, and body don't have to be perfect. You just need to be able to do what you're called to do. This podcast is for women who want simple and grace-filled ways, yes, there's that. I told you I use that word a lot, to take care of themselves and enjoy a little chocolate in the process. As I said in the intro, I really felt in this season of In the Word, it was worth spending a little bit of time on the word grace. Not only how it applies to our health, but how it just applies to us in general. I also know that I really don't have the depth and wisdom to bring that to you, but I knew who to bring on. And that is my friend, Emily Baker. Now, I have to tell you, Emily and I met when we were going into the first grade. I think I have a picture of us probably around fifth grade or so. I will try and find that and put it on the show notes. But she has been a real constant in my life. We have gone through phases where we talk more, sometimes where we talk less, but she's always been there, and I'm so grateful for her experience. I'll tell you a little bit more about her in just a second, but I have to tell you first, this conversation covers a lot. I can't even tell you how many notes I took. I can't wait to go back, listen again, take my own notes, because she just offers so much. We talk about just the basics of grace. That word is used, and understanding a little bit more. We talk a lot about story work, our lives growing up, and how that impacts our ability to give and receive it now. She gave me the word or the term cheap grace, which I've never heard before. And that just kind of blew my mind. We'll get into that a little. She reminds me, and hopefully us, about the importance of listening to our body, which I know I've had a podcast episode on that before, but this is in a little bit of a different sense. And so it is such a great way to give yourself grace when you, I'm just going to let you listen to it. I'm not going to spoil it for you right now. We hear some of her favorite Bible verses. I mean, I am telling you, I am so grateful for this conversation with Emily. Emily is a wife to her high school sweetheart, who is now the pastor of Grace Presbyterian Church in Stillwater, Oklahoma. She's the mother of 4 children, ranging in age from 9 to 19. She's been a fitness instructor and personal trainer for 17 years. And I actually had this conversation with her that I remember visiting her when her husband was in seminary. Her oldest was in diapers, and she said, "Hey, I've got to teach this class. You want to come with me?" And I said, "Well, I didn't really bring any shoes or any clothes." And she said, "Oh, that's no big deal." And so I think I put on a pair of her shoes and we went. It was great. She is the creator of her own company, EB Designs, which provides fashionable earrings at affordable prices. She's made and sold over 15,000 pairs since starting in late 2017. If you see me in any of my pictures with earrings that are bigger than like a stud or a little bitty hoop, those are EB Designs. I only wear big earrings that are EBs because I don't like the weight of them, and she makes the lightest earrings that I've ever had, at least. I know that the EB's Designs has been such a huge gift from God for her. She has always been passionate about living out of the power and gospel and walking alongside people in their journeys. She's recently completed the first certification of the Allender Center's narrative-based trauma care counseling program, which has taught her how to explore her own life story and help others share theirs. We actually get into this a little bit, and I think you're going to find it really fascinating if you're not familiar with it. She would love in the future to be in full-time therapy to some degree, and she's just kind of waiting to see how things develop. Do note, we talk about a lot of different things, lots of resources. I am going to link all of the resources, references, and then she also has some book recommendations. All of those will be in the show notes. Go to gracedhealth.com/Emily Baker Grace, all one word. EmilYBakerGrace. Go check those out. And I am going to bring on my conversation with Emily Baker mid-laugh because that's just the way we roll. Oh, Emily, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for coming on the Graced Health podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's so much fun. It's so fun to see you right now.
Well, okay. You and I had not intended to do video, and then you suggested it. And you got a special treat today because this is the first time in like 2 weeks that I have had makeup and hair on. Pretty much in general. I'm in like regular clothes. You can't see my shorts, but I have regular shorts on and a regular shirt because I tend to get in my gym clothes. And like even yesterday, I didn't even work out, but I was in gym clothes all day long. So special treat for you today.
Thank you. I love seeing you. You look beautiful.
Well, you do too. You do too.
I don't know that I fixed up for you, but I did put on some earrings.
Well, yes. And I do love your earrings, and I would have put your earrings on in honor of you, even if I wasn't going to see you. But I think my headphones would have smashed them. So yeah, they didn't get on today. Okay. So we're sitting here. It's a Wednesday. It's Wednesday, right? Yes.
Yes.
Tell me what your day has been like today, because we are still under quarantine. We've got, you've got your 4 kids at home and your dog Pepper. And what's your day been like today?
Well, it's really chilly here, but I have been leading an outdoor workout with under 10 people. So about 8 or 9 ladies show up. And if an 11th shows up, she just has to turn around and go running. And it's in a parking lot. And I got permission from the mayor, and we have really loud music and we do a HIIT class. And it's a great thing for me because it's a ritual I really needed in my life. So Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, I get to actually hurry. It feels so good to have to be somewhere on time. And I go to our church parking lot, and I did that this morning, and it was really cold, but I was so impressed. Everyone rolled out. We had 9 people, and we did a HIIT class, and then we came home, and we are having our house painted on the outside because we're in a big home remodel, which is the worst time to be having a home remodel because we have a lot of things that we're getting rid of, and no place takes donations right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and our garage has become the CrossFit gym for my husband and daughter, and it's also the storage. Anyway, it's just we run a really tight shipwreck over here. My 4 kids. My oldest is a college student, and he's pretty well. He's well oiled, so he knows what he's doing. But everyone else has to be managed. I mean, I'm trying to get them up at a certain time, and they've been kind of schooling here and there. And my 9-year-old has my phone more than I do, so she's now talking to all her friends on my phone and FaceTiming, and so that's going to be an addiction we'll have to try to unwind after all this is over. But that's what my days look like. Just, I'm home now and talking to you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I have heard some really great stories just from my personal friends about their daughters. I think actually some of their sons, having their phones or their iPads. And I think one girl had a potential client call, and her 4-year-old daughter answered the FaceTime. And I mean,
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
all the things.
What do you
Um,
expect?
I know, I know. I don't know if you've seen any of the Jimmy Fallon Saturday Night Live like at home things. It's
Yes.
fantastic. I mean, he just totally captures the essence of everything that is going on right now, and I love his humor in it. So,
Yes. We have
yeah.
seen a few. I need to see all of them because I love him. So,
Yes, yes. Oh goodness. Okay, but we are not here to talk about Jimmy Fallon, even though I could probably talk about those bits all
yes.
the time. We are here today to talk about grace, which is a really big word, even though it's very small. I like to use grace a lot. I have had a lot of friends kind of almost throw that back at me sometimes when I'm like, oh, or struggling about something that I've done or beating myself up. Or, I mean, I even had one friend one time say, I sweat a lot. And so when I speak, I'm like, I wardrobe is a really big deal because I sweat so much under my arms. She goes, you just need to give yourself some grace for that. I'm like, don't you use my own word on me. But I was wondering if we could just kind of start with the basics and if you could help us delve into that word and just kind of give us a broad definition of it and just help us understand that word a little bit more.
Well, I love that question. And it's actually something that you have challenged me with because when you came out with the podcast, um, I even have a church called Grace, and you came out with the podcast, Graced Health. And I think it really made me think about, since I'm a fitness instructor, I thought, well, what would that even look like? Because I think we can throw around the word as if to say, like, you're all good, just have grace. But yet we know as a believer, it's a robust word. And so as you've challenged me to think about how does that even connect with health? Um, I do think it's good to start with the basics. And I think grace, this is what came to me over the last like 24 hours thinking about talking to you, is like a gift bag. And it's so full. And as you unpack it, it just gets better and better. But it's the package to which all that's in Christ comes to us. And I'm going to use some big words because I love theology. But I mean, we're talking justification, sanctification, union with Christ, our identity, our adoption. So these big words, these big truths that we learn through scripture, I think are in this gift bag of grace. And so to unpack it, I think sometimes it really helps to look at the opposite of grace. I think when we learn words, we often will say, well, what's the opposite? And it helps us really digest it. And I think the opposite of grace is shame. And shame is the air we breathe as humans. We are orphan nature. We think we're alone. We're isolated. That's what depression and anxiety do to us. We think we're alone. I think shame is the essence of I'm on my own. I got to clean myself up. I got to prove to everyone I'm something. And, it's just that like fear based life. And so grace says, and this is a very, silly way to say it, but Ryan used this in his sermon on Sunday, on Easter Sunday. It's like the feeling when you think someone's mad at you and it's been eating you up and you find out they say, no, 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 I'm not mad at you. And it's so relieving. It just has that like, there's this Avett brother, or not Avett. I never had to.
The
Do you know the
Avett
group?
Brothers. I know who you're
Yes.
talking about. I don't know how to
Okay.
pronounce it either. Yeah.
They have a song and it's called like, oh, what is it called? The Beautiful Colombian Woman, or her name's Gabriella. And they sing this song and they're just lamenting that they've hurt her and they haven't been good to her and, hurt her feelings. And then like 3/4 of the way through the song is this recording of her saying on the telephone machine, oh, hey, you're okay. I'm not upset. We all go our different directions and I'm not mad at you. And it's like this cute little message. And then right after the message beeps, you hear this just like jamming out, like guitar going crazy. Anyway, it's just like this jam session because they're so relieved that she's not mad. And I think the idea of grace is that God isn't mad at us. In fact, we've been living our whole lives as if he is. And we do. I struggle daily. I think we all in different ways do. But I just think that's the package of grace is um we're adopted into a family and we are clean. We're good.
Hmm.
So does that
Yeah,
make
we
sense?
are. Yeah, no, that does. Do you know the name of that song by chance?
Yeah. I need to look it up. It's funny. I even posted it on Facebook because it makes me laugh every time I listen to it. So if you want to like,
We will link it. We will link to it in the show notes. We'll do that. I'll find it.
if,
You and I, or you can remind me later.
if I had my phone and my 9-year-old wasn't using it to FaceTime right now, I would look it up, but I have nothing to, I can't do it. So
you know what? That's just,
it's one of their older songs. So,
okay. All right. No, that's fine. We're all good. We're all good. You and I have had a lot of personal discussions. I mean, we have been friends for almost 40 years. Do you realize that? How are
yeah,
we? I don't even know
amazing.
how we're that old. But so you and I have had a lot of offline discussions. And one of the things that you have said kind of like threaded into a conversation, and I've never really gotten a chance to unpack it a little bit. So I thought maybe we could hear, but you've talked about how the Apostle Paul talks about, or talked about as his faith and his ministry grow, so did his need for grace. And we see that in the scriptures, and we see that in a lot of the books that he wrote in the Bible. But, this still seems really counterintuitive, because my mind feels like as I'm getting closer to Christ, as I'm following Jesus more, I'm using this quote in air quotes, but better. And I need to do more, and my actions need to be more Christ-like, and, all of that kind of stuff. So how do we bridge that gap from where our mind feels like, well, if I'm a Jesus follower, then I need to be doing all the right things, to, oh no, actually, as my faith is growing, I need that grace a lot more.
Yeah. Well, there's something that I love that I was taught way back in my 20s called the cross chart. And it really spells out what our sanctification looks like. And I think it's like that gift bag of grace. You get it. And when you get it, you become a believer, and you see that there's a gap. There's a gap between our sin, or our depravity, or whatever you want to call it, our bad habits, and God's glory. And you get this grace, and you see, oh, the bridge is gapped, right? We kind of all know the bridge theory. But as we live our lives, we see more of our deficiencies. We see more of our bad habits, more of our sin, more of our inability to break pretty destructive patterns, actually. And simultaneously, we see God's glory more and more as we study him and as we kind of unpack this gift. And so if you could imagine like a greater than sign, like the triangle, at the place where it opens up, that's like it's our eyes, and our eyes are opened up to the deficiency, like the gap between the lower line, which is my sin, and the upper line, which is God's glory. Now, they don't actually grow. So my sin doesn't grow as it goes down, and neither does God's glory. It's just my eyes see it. And so if you imagine at the top of the widest part of this greater than sign, here's God's glory way up here, and here's my depravity. As I grow in my faith, I'm going to see more of my problems, and I'm going to be more sensitive to them, and I'm going to expect more out of myself. But God's glory gets bigger and bigger, and the key is the cross fills the gap. So in my life, that cross is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I need Jesus all the more. So I thought I needed him when I first got grace. But as I unpack my adoption and, my union with him, I need him so much more. And then if the cross isn't filling that gap, oftentimes I will spin my wheels down below to try to make excuses, or to think of ways to clean myself or make myself feel better, new rituals, New Year's resolutions, whatever you call it. And if that cross isn't filling that gap, it can feel really frustrating. But I think that's what it looks like to grow, is that our identity is so wrapped up in that cross that we are becoming more beautiful, even though I would say, oh, I'm way more aware of my wretchedness and my unbelief and my desire to run and my denial of Christ, but yet I'm clinging so much to that huge cross that you see actually more of the fruit, the gentleness and the kindness, and the things that we think of as Christians.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that
I don't know if that makes
visual.
sense. It's a visual, yeah.
Yeah, it is. And actually, I don't know if you remember. showing me, you drew that out for me a couple of years ago at your house. And then you had actually recommended the book A Praying Life by Paul Miller to me, and that was in there. And I was like, "Oh, that's Emily." I've seen that before. But it is, and I love how you say we're more aware of ourselves because I think as we grow, we're kind of open ourselves up a little bit more, and I know that that's true on an emotional basis. As we grow emotionally, it's true spiritually. So I think that's great, and that visual is really good. I will, at a minimum, take a picture of that in that book and paste it in the show notes.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I've always seen it drawn as a straight line, and I've noticed in my life, um, especially as a woman with hormones, that the bottom line, that's my awareness of my sin, it
Mhm.
is way more wavy. I'll have a day where I feel really good about myself, and the cross is still there, and I rely on Jesus. But I mean, the next day it could bottom out, and I feel like I suck at everything. And there's kind of that lag time of like, oh yeah, I need Jesus to fill that gap. And there can be those days or even like a week where it just feels like I'm in a funk or a depression. And that cross, like I have to do the discipline of like relying on that grace to unpack. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does,
That's
and I
good.
really love, yeah, the wavy line because I think,
Yeah.
like you said, as a woman, I know what you're talking about. I have a feeling our listeners do too, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so it seems like no matter what the situation is, I am way more apt to give grace to others and more quickly to give grace to others than myself. And I want to clarify that means more like when they are struggling with something, it can be hard to give grace sometimes when we've been harmed. So I do want to make that little bit of a clarification. And we're in the middle of COVID-19 right now, and I'm trying to remind my community to give themselves grace, whether or not it's from a health perspective or not. Life is different right now. So, and then I've had women come, and this isn't just right now, but they've come to me just in frustration and how their body looks. And I can say, yeah, but this is great. And I can so easily point out all of the amazing things about their physical self, their spiritual self, I mean, anything about it. Or someone may tell me about their past, and it's really hard. I can easily look past that. I can easily look past all of the things and all of the challenges of that. But it's a lot harder to do that to myself and to give myself grace for that. Why is that such a hard time? Why is it so easy to give it to other people, especially in their personal challenges, but not necessarily give it to ourselves?
Hmm. Well, I think it's an amazing question. And yet it's so complex. I think um, we are really inconsistent. I think what you're saying is true, that we give grace, but I don't think we always give grace. If you trip over someone's shoe in the hallway and stub your toe, I know for me, if it's someone else's shoe, I'm going to scream at that person. But if I look down and it's my shoe, oh, I've got to just, kind of put it to the side. And if someone else is gaining weight at a rapid level, you might have grace. But if it's your husband and you see and you're frustrated with him, I mean, we're inconsistent. We do have a low view of ourselves sometimes, and other times we have a really high view. And I think there is an element of we all at our core want people to like us. And
Mhm.
so we will give grace to others because we know we want them to like us. Just like if you can be yelling at your kids one minute and the phone rings and you're like, oh, hey,
Oh
girl.
my gosh. That brings up so many memories. Go on.
Right? Okay. So we don't care if our kids like us. We want our friends to like us. We don't
Oh.
care if sometimes we don't care what we think about ourselves. So we'll be really mean to ourselves. There will be cruel comments going on inside our heads that we think is just a normal thought life. And it's not. You wouldn't say them to someone else. So
Mhm.
I think we're completely like bipolar in terms of I hate myself, I love myself. I hate myself, I love myself. And so it really comes down to your story. And I think it comes down to your story, meaning where the areas in which we give ourselves grace is where we were probably given grace and it's not really an issue. But where we beat ourselves up is where we've got some very childish places in our lives that have some neurons that are just misfiring and some things that we probably need to go, what's happening there? And we can talk about that later a little bit when we maybe talk about story work that I love. But all in all, I think we give other people grace because we do want to be encouragers, and we're not tied to them like we are to ourselves. So we don't hate the cycles that they seem to be experiencing like we hate the cycles in our own lives. So I hate when I see myself do the same thing I've been doing and I keep figuring out a way I'm going to become more disciplined and then I don't. And actually this concept comes up a lot in our marriage because I'm kind of one of those steady, kind of mediocre, or not mediocre. What's the word? Like moderation. That's the word. I um I have a 2 o'clock Coke every day. Like it's just my vice. I love it. But my husband does like straight up keto diet, fast Mondays and Thursdays until 5, does CrossFit every day at noon, hardcore. But he'll have a cheat day that it is crazy how much he can put down. I mean, sugar, fat, you name it, it's going in. And sometimes that cheat day turns into a cheat week and it's ugly, but then he can get back on. So he's a lot more hot and cold. Whereas I can look like, what's your big deal? Just kind of have one Coke and it's no big deal. But we obviously have different stories and we have different reactions to like how we're trying to like get clean. That I feel like that I'm probably jumping all over the place, but I think we're all trying to kind of be right somehow. Like we're trying to prove it goes back to grace. The opposite of grace is shame. And shame says you're all alone. You got to prove yourself. You got to clean yourself up and you got to make yourself right. And so I think we all have these little areas where we live in shame. And where we live in shame, we're going to be trying so hard. And so if we don't feel the shame for someone else gaining weight, of course we can be kind to them, but we don't feel the shame. So I think that's where it's tied is when we're not kind to ourselves, it's because we're living in shame in that moment.
That makes a lot of sense. And the inconsistency really, that really hits home for me too. And yeah, yelling at our kids and then picking up, oh, hi, how's it going? Because one thing I have realized about myself recently, as I've kind of dug into my own, a little bit of my story, but also just trying to be a little more aware of myself is, yeah, I want people to like me. I mean, like I am, for the Enneagram people, I'm a type 9, like I'm a people pleaser. I want everyone to get along. I want people to like me. I don't want to do anything to rock the boat. And I think
And one thing, not to interrupt you, but one thing to think about when I think about grace, it isn't like, so in some ways I want to compare it to kindness because it is the kindness of God that is intended to lead us to repentance. I mean, it is the kindness of God to give us this gift, but it is not how we imagine kindness. Like you're being kind and you're being a good personal trainer to be an encourager, right? But you're not having to die for their issue. Like you're not really having to absorb the punishment. And there's a big issue in our world of cheap grace. I mean, we just celebrated Easter and we know a lot of us watched movies and relived the Passion Week and really thought through the crucifixion. There was a cost to that grace. And so I think we can say and throw around that term like, oh yeah, I'll have grace on you. That's cool. It's not the same when you're dealing with an area of shame. You got to really deal with, I got to die to the idea that when I love the verse, where in Hebrews 12, Jesus says, or it's about Jesus, he endured the cross, scorning its shame. And really it says despised its shame. And I just think that despising of the idea that we could be separated from God and have to live a life like that orphan who's trying to find a morsel out there, that's what took Jesus to the cross. And so there's been a huge payment for us to get to live in grace. But we can throw it around like it's just a, trump card. It's just harder to do when it's to ourselves and there's shame there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally does. It totally does. And I want to stay on there for just a minute. This concept of cheap grace. And then when you were talking about, your husband and being super strict and, keto and fasting and all of that kind of stuff, because I have somewhat of a similar cycle in just that I mean, I can't tell you how long I've been doing this, but I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And this is how I'm going to exercise. And this is how I'm going to eat. And I'm regimented and I'm only limiting myself to 2 pieces of Dove chocolate a day and this and checking the box and checking the box. And then I'm like, but I'm not really feeling, I don't really feel balanced doing this because it's taking away baking cookies with my kids, or something like that. And so I kind of pull back a little bit and I'm like, I'm just going to give myself a little grace and not be too worried about that. And then, baking cookies with the kids turns into eating all of the cookies that I baked with the kids and just sliding down, sliding down, sliding down. And I have felt sometimes like there comes a point when I cross this line of giving myself grace to abuse. In my words, or I feel like it's abusing the grace, and that might be, and maybe that's what you're talking about with the cheap grace. So how can we do that? How can we like give ourselves grace, but not take it to the point that it's cheap, like you say?
Yeah, I think when I get into these conversations with my husband or with myself or clients, I think we can spin our wheels trying to find that sweet spot, and it's going to be different for everybody. And it can even bring up so much stress, and that's even worse for our bodies than chocolate. I think what we're doing is we're trying to find this perfect sweet spot of um, how can I be righteous? How can I be perfectly disciplined and undisciplined at the same time? How can I be this perfect regiment and yet fun-loving mom? And there's a verse, and I think it's Ephesians, that says neither circumcision nor uncircumcision has any value, but faith working itself through love. And we did a study one time where you could plug in any good thing, circumcision nor uncircumcision. You could say neither eating chocolate nor not eating chocolate has any value, but faith working itself through love. Neither being on a diet or not, having a cheat day or not. Like, you plug in anything that you're wrestling with. And it's tricky because faith working itself through love is a pretty robust comment, but it's basically saying your faith, which is the receiving of that grace, right? That's the receiving. It works itself out through love. Okay, if I'm completely clean and righteous and I just say, I'm going to wake up today and nothing I do, so neither this nor that has any value, but faith working itself through love, I'm not going to worry so much about what I do or what I don't do. It's going to be, am I loving this beautiful Savior back? And it's not going to be formulaic. And I think we're dying for formulas, and it's just not formulaic. So for you, Amy, it might be, yeah, please bake cookies with your kids. Please eat all the dough and have fun doing it and make a mess because you're too clean and you're too skinny, right? But then other people, oh, please limit yourself. Like, please be kind to what does that even mean? What does it look like to be kind to yourself? It's just not formulaic.
Mm-hmm.
So, I have an example you can choose to use or not use, but it's something that has stuck with me a long time. Ryan actually came up with it because he used it in a sermon, and we live in a house up until right now. It's in the middle of a home remodel, which is crazy during COVID, but we have always lived in this house, or really in any house we live in, that needs a lot of repair. And he is not a handyman. He's a great man. He's wise and he loves to sit, and we could talk for hours and we're best friends. But when it comes to handiwork and yard work, it's just not his thing. And he'll tell you that. So I'm not talking behind his back.
No,
So
I'm sitting here nodding.
Yeah.
I'm like, yep, got one of those myself.
Yeah. So if I come to him and say, hey, it's chore day. Here's our list of chores, and we've got this broken and this broken. He's like, choose one and we'll do it. Well, okay. So his analogy he came up with was beautiful, that the doorbell rings and a handyman shows up and he says, your father has hired me. I've come. I can do anything that you need, from fixing to repairing to cleaning to completely demolishing and redoing. I will do it for you, and I will continue to come every day and make your house beautiful. So give me the list. Well, Ryan in the past has said, just give me one thing, because I can't even look. Like, I don't want to look. If I look, I don't know what to do with it. I get overwhelmed. But this handyman is saying, I'm capable, I'm free, so I've been paid for by someone else, but you have to be honest. Give me the list. And so then he would change his tune and he would say, oh, let me tell you everything. Because he used to say to me, Emily, nothing's wrong with our house. We're fine. That doorknob, it's fine. But then the handyman comes and he's like, oh, here's the list. And it is huge. And I think that is the freedom we get in Christ. When the handyman who is Christ comes in and says, I will sanctify you, I will change you from the inside out, and I will beautify you. But you got to give me your list. Well, then we get really honest. And so I think that's kind of where we can go. Honestly, what's the best thing for me today? I probably should have my Coke because it's a ritual that I really enjoy, and I'll have it as soon as I hang up with you. But should I have a huge tub of ice cream tonight? I don't know. I don't think so. It doesn't make me feel that good. But if I did, I don't need to have guilt or shame because it doesn't affect my standing, my righteousness, my position with Christ. And that's really our identity.
Yeah. Yeah, that is. Okay. So where my mind is going with that is, oh, I don't even know if we want to go there or not. I, I hear all of that with what you're saying, but then at what point does it turn into finding your identity, but then not taking care of the body and the temple that you've been given? Like there's got to be some sort of, I mean, and again, I know you're not saying there's a formula, but there's got to be some balance. Is that even the right word? I mean, where do we find that? Because
Yeah.
a gallon of ice cream every night, or whatever it is going to end up taking us to a point where we're physically not going to be able to do what God is calling us to do.
Yeah. I mean, because you read the Psalms and there's a lot about, these people were fat and sleek. And you're like, wait, we don't want to be fat. What is our culture calling us to and what's really good for our body type? I think our story plays a big deal here. I think we sabotage without knowing it. Then that's a big word. I don't even know how to unpack it. We often will do good things and then without even realizing it, kind of ruin it. Like almost in relationships, we do it, or like the way we talk. We will belittle ourselves without even realizing it. I think we can do the same with our health. And in the same way, we can also not do things that we really should be doing because we think we don't deserve it. So what I mean is like we can have kind of a low view of ourselves, like, oh, I shouldn't, like if I'm going to give up something, I should probably give up my gym membership because that's kind of a luxury when it's not. Like that's really good for your body. Your body needs movement to release stress, and stress is a bigger killer. I don't know. I can't give formulas because the gospel doesn't have them except receiving that gift and unpacking it and going, what does this mean? And I think when we look at our lives, we just all have different unique stories as to where we're not really taking care of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the ACEs study I've talked to you about.
Yeah. Why don't you know what you've been talking about story work. So I want to just open the door to this. I know you've done a lot of story work through the Allender Center, and you can go back and explain the Allender because I don't want to derail you from what you're talking about. But let's talk about how the stories from our childhood and from our growing up can really impact our ability to give and receive grace. And then let's just kind of keep going there because I don't want to stop you where you're going because I love this element of it, and I think it's really mind blowing to me.
Yeah. Well, okay. So let me jump in. Story work is us looking at our lives as a narrative, and I do what's called narrative trauma based or trauma narrative. I don't know what it's called. Edit that out. Anyway, trauma is a big word that a lot of us would say, I don't really have trauma. And I'm going to just say what the Allender Center says is there's big T trauma and there's small T trauma. And we can't live. This is where non-believers, Christians, every religion's going to agree that there is trauma. That's one thing we can all come together on. But what is your trauma? And if you've been in public school, middle school, you've been through trauma. I mean, if you ever had a friend not call you back and snub you, you've been through trauma. If you've had a car accident, if you've been raped, if you have had a parent leave your family, if you've been divorced, I mean, there's all kinds of trauma. Now, when it happens in the early childhood times, it is forming those neurons. And so if you can go back into your story and say, yeah, how was I handled? How was my negative emotions handled? How was I attuned to? Did someone hear me, see me, feel me? Did someone know me? Was I cared for? What kind of things did I go through? And as I look through those things and I can identify some markers that would be kind of called trauma, I can then dig in a little bit and activate my memory and write stories. And as I do that, I'm going to find the places where my neurons between my right and left brain are not firing smoothly. So we want to go emotional to logical, logical to emotional, right? So when you're a teenage girl, you live in the emotional brain. And when you have been traumatized anywhere under like 18 years old, you're often stuck in that age when that trauma occurred. And so and maybe it was ongoing, where you act the most childish, if something happens to you and you find yourself acting 7 or 13 and you are either, doing the fight, the flight, or the freeze, that's an indicator, okay, something's going on there. Something is being triggered. What is it? And so when we can learn our stories and learn who we are, not just who we are in terms of personality, but who we are, like, what do we love and what do we hate? And I think Christians don't give that enough credit. What we hate usually comes out of a traumatizing event. And that could be an ongoing mother who never listened. It could be an ongoing father who was abusive. It could be an ongoing sibling who made fun of you. And so when you look at these childhood stories, something was developing in that. And a lot of reasons why we do what we do now as adults is coming out of those places. I hate fill in the blank. That's probably what you are the most passionate about. Now, it's different from gifting, right? So you're gifted at a lot of things, Amy, but the reason you're doing this podcast is not a giftedness, it's a passion. And that passion's coming from a love for something and a hate for something. And so that's kind of the story. I mean, there's a lot to do with our story work. And for me as a believer, it's not a new gospel. It is a way to, when you think about the scriptures that say renew your mind, or the healing that comes, it's like a new tool. When I can learn my story, it's a surgical tool to get that gospel deep into my heart and my body and my soul. If I don't know where I'm broken, I can't give the list to the workman. I can't say, here, I need this fixed, because I don't know I'm broken. But if I can look at my story and I can write stories from my childhood and I can see themes and I can find, where did I agree with evil, that I am too sensitive? Where did I make a vow that I'll never cry again? Where did I make these vows and agreements? That's where the gospel needs to come in and heal me. And those vows and agreements, the agreement with evil that was spoken to us, we begin to agree with, and it's those accusations we live with, those play into our health so much. And I've talked to you about The Body Keeps the Score. That's a really good book about understanding how trauma stays in our bodies. And that's where I have a lot of grace, and that's a big word, but a lot of grace on people that are severely overweight, and a lot of it is trauma based. And so it's not just bad choices. I can't look at them and say, well, that idiot ate too many Pringles. No, there is a lifelong of hating her body. Maybe when she was thin, she was abused. Maybe when she was told she was beautiful, it was by an abuser who would then hurt her. I mean, who knows what kind of trauma is happening in her life or his life that's causing that sabotage. And that's what I was talking about earlier. We sabotage good things because sometimes it's the pattern that we've lived by for so long. So learning our story helps us really understand what's making us tick.
Oh, wow. That's good. Preach it, Emily. That's really powerful. I know you and I have had those conversations about story work, and it really never occurred to me that so much of what we have, we're growing up for 18 years of our lives. And then I've been out of the house for, what is it, 27 years now. And it's hard to imagine how much impact that has. And, I had had great parents. So I want to be careful in what I say. I mean, I had great parents and great family and all of that kind of stuff, but we all do have a story. Um,
Well,
so
and just to piggyback on that, we all have great parents to some degree, and you and I both do. We can say we do, and they're
yeah,
probably listening, and we can say, "Oh, it was a great childhood." But if we are believers who would say that every human is a sinner in need of this grace, then we shouldn't give ourselves, our spouses, or our parents that pass, like, "Oh, they're doing the best they can." They're not. They sometimes sin,
mhm.
and actually quite often, and they need Jesus. Now, that's where repair comes in, but we can still name the things that hurt us, and we invite our children to that daily. We want them to express to us, where have we hurt you? How does it hurt? And let's talk about it so there can be repair, you know?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's something I've been working on with my kids. Um, Though, yeah, I think sometimes too, it's hard for them to be able to name that. So I'll be like, "I did this. I'm really sorry." They're like, "It's not a big deal."
yeah.
Anyway, we won't get off on that. I try and leave my kids out of things as much as I can. Okay, so I want to make sure that we include resources. So at the end, I'm going to see what kind of resources you can give people who want to know a little bit more about story work. But I would like to ask just a couple more questions. You know, I don't know how long you've been a fitness instructor, but I remember visiting you when you lived in St. Louis and your oldest was in diapers, and we went to, I don't even know what, maybe it was the Y, and you were teaching a class, and I borrowed your shoes. Thank goodness we wear the same size. I don't know if you remember this or not, but you've been doing this a long time, sister. That's where I'm getting at. Um, where do you wish, so I know you've seen a lot of people come through the doors, where do you wish participants would give themselves more grace in from a health perspective?
Um, I think, I hope this answers your question. I have seen people come into my class and beat themselves, like almost torture, and not have a lot of change. And I know something else is going on. I know it's got to be what they're eating or how they're treating their body. And so I think grace, because it's a robust word, doesn't have to mean, y'all, it's all good. It can mean, wait, stop, look, listen to your body. What are you really needing? Do you need to come to this high impact class, or should you be going to a relaxing meditation, yoga, Pilates type? I mean, I think I would love to see people listening to their bodies more. And that's what I don't think I learned until even the last 2 years. Listening to my body means being kind to myself, like I would to if I love my child and she is, coughing one day. I want her just to lay down and rest, and I'm just going to give her a pass. But if she's fully healthy, and I'm going to do what's good for her, right? So I think the grace that I would want people to show on themselves is, what do I need today? And no guilt. So if I do need to skip class, don't tell me you feel guilty about it. It's okay. If you need to come every single day because that's your ritual and that keeps you sane, do it. And don't make excuses like, oh, I think sometimes we feel bad for needing things. And especially during the COVID-19, this has become so apparent. I think we think, oh, I'm such a weak person or a weak Christian because I really needed that group of people I saw, or I needed that routine, or I needed my child to go to school. I'm mad at myself because I should be fine right now. But it's not true. Our bodies are meant for the liturgies of our day. We're meant to wake up and have breakfast and go somewhere and get dressed and see people and do the things that we have created for ourselves that are good for us, including exercise. And so I just think the grace that I'd like to see on people coming in and out of my classes are just that, like, pure bliss of like, I'm so glad to be here. I might not see you for another 3 weeks because I'm busy with kids, but there's no guilt. You know
Mhm.
what I mean?
Amen. No, yes, 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 yes. Especially that aspect of listening to your body and being okay with not doing. If you're supposed to do a HIT class on Wednesdays and you don't show up to the HIT class and you feel guilty about it, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's
So
I
it's kind of that balance of like, it's okay not to go, but it's also okay to really need that. Like if you didn't
yeah.
get to go because a kid had a field trip. I really miss that. We shouldn't feel guilty either if we really need that for our mental health and our physical health, because I even heard this podcast recently, which I'll put a plug in now for Adam Young. His
Yes.
podcast called The Place We Find Ourselves has been our bread and butter for the last year or two. And I will say, one of his podcasts that rocked my world, and it's labeled something like "We Need More Than God," which is kind of shocking, but it's about marriage. And it's really interesting how he revealed that in the garden, before the fall, before sin, before any shame came in, there was one problem. And the one problem was that Adam didn't have a mate, didn't have a partner. And so God created a woman for him. And so if we're married and we find ourselves needing our husband or needing our wife, that's actually not a weakness. That's a God given need. And so we need husbands and wives. We need a lot of things that God has given us in a lot of good ways. And so
Mhm.
to need them is not the problem. It's then making ourselves feel guilty for needing them. That's just shame, and that's the enemy. That's the accusations that need to just go back to hell.
Yeah. It's funny. We were talking in our family, and I didn't, not that I was trying to like focus on the things, but I was trying to figure out like where are people missing things? And so I posed the question like, what person or group of people are you really missing right now? And not trying to say like what's the most or whatever. But I hadn't really even thought about what that answer would be for myself. And when we kind of got around the table and I said, you know what I really miss? And I miss a lot of people. I really miss hugging people. But I said, I really miss my class. It's just that community and that fellowship. And I I do. I need them. I mean, I'm not making very much money off of that class, but I need them in my life. And it's yeah, I mean, just sometimes being too taken away from that really makes you realize how important they are. Or
Well, and
yeah.
something I learned in the story work is just how amazing our brains are, that our brains are actually created for other brains, and that mirror receptor. Like, one of the reasons why I wanted to look at you today during this interview is I love seeing your eyes and your smile and everything you're doing. That's attunement. Like, I can look at you and talk to you. And when
Mhm.
we don't have that right now, except for the people in our home, it can be really taxing on our bodies. We need that attunement.
Yeah. Yeah, we really do. Um, okay, do you have a favorite Bible verse?
Well, Um, I would have to break it up into genres. Like, if you say, "What's my favorite movie?" I'd have to know, like, are you talking about a romance? Are you talking about a whodunit? I mean, I will say that, Hebrews, 43 no, I just said Hebrews, Isaiah 43. Isaiah 43 was like a love letter to me from God that I read every morning for about 2.5 years during a really hard season, and, I love every bit of it. um, One of the things I love is that it has a twofold promise, several times. When you walk through the fire, you'll not be burned. And when you walk through the waters, the waves will not consume you. And recently I was reading, and I don't have it memorized like the psalm itself, but it said, "Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but God will see them through every one." And I thought, what a beautiful twofold promise. We will see many afflictions, but God will see us through every one of them. Um, I love the verse, and I go, I'm really sounding pretty bad here. I don't know the address, but maybe you can plug it in for me, like me seem really smart. But I say it a lot, and it's the man that said to Jesus, "I believe, help my unbelief." And that's kind of my motto to life, to be honest. I do believe, but help my unbelief. Um, I love the story of Joseph. I love the story work there, that his father set him up to be arrogant, and his brothers were jealous, and it was not a good situation, but God used it for good. I think we all have Joseph stories. I love Romans because I love theology, but I have to be in the mood for it. But I just really love Romans 6, 7, 8. I feel like it really sums up everything about our faith, and you can't really read it and come away with cheap grace or that you can do anything, because there's a lot of really strong containment in the Bible, strong boundaries, really clear lines. And I actually like that. I'm kind of a structured person, and I like when I know exactly what to do. Doesn't mean I don't break the rules, but I just like to know what they are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that helps.
No,
I
those are good. We'll get clarification on all of those and put them in the show notes. Okay. You are awesome. I feel like we could go on forever and ever, but I'm not going to do that to people. So, I thank you, Emily, so much for doing this. And again, in the middle of house remodeling and kids home, and it's just a crazy time. So thank you for carving this little bit of time out. This is such a rich conversation, and I'm really grateful for that, for you. Now, we didn't even get a chance to talk about your other thing that you do. So tell people where they can find you. And if you could do a little bit, this is what I would love from you. I'm putting you on the spot here. So you are the EB, Emily Baker of EB Designs. And could you very quickly tell us a little bit about how EB Designs came to be? Because I try and tell people when I give them my earrings, and I'm sure I screw it all up. So I would love to hear in your words about that, and then just where people can get in touch with you.
Oh, you're so sweet, first of all. Okay, well, I did tell you earlier that what you're doing in life probably is coming out of a passion of what you love or what you hate. But I think another thing that creates space for us as adults and kind of defines what we're doing, my motto again, another motto, I should say, is that constraints breed creativity. And my husband coined that phrase for me. We've had some constraints in our lives because we have chosen a path of ministry and seminary and paying for all that and not being in maybe the climbing economics, you would say.
It's not necessarily the most lucrative career. Ministry.
Yeah, that's the way to say it. But at the same time, we've never missed a meal. We just have to be pretty tight. And I love to budget because, again, I told you I love constraints and I love the lines being drawn. But I was given a pair of lightweight leather earrings for, of all things, Pastor Appreciation Week. My good friend Amy Tidlin gave me a pair at church. I opened it right there and squealed. I put them on, and I have slit earrings from wearing 200-pound earrings during the 90s. And so I've had to wear studs, and I love big earrings. So when I put these lightweight leather ones on, they didn't pull on my earlobes and make those gross slits look even grosser. And so being who I am, I was like, Amy, I love these. I have to have more because they're so cute and I can be stylish again. Like I can wear a t-shirt and look stylish. How much are they? And she goes, oh, they're $25 at whatever, blah, blah, blah website. And I immediately to myself was like, $25 isn't going to work for our budget because we spend $100 a month on 6 people's clothing budget. Now, that was 3 years ago. And the next day I went to Hobby Lobby and I spent $27 on supplies. And I decided to cut my own leather earrings. And so I did. But all the leather that I bought, it was like little pieces. It made like 7 pairs of earrings each. And I didn't really want 7 brown and 7 black and 7 tan. So I kept my 3. And so I was just kind of making earrings. A friend happened to text me. I texted her back and then I took a picture and said, look what I'm doing. And I sent it back to her, not realizing it was a group text. And I didn't even know half the people on there. I was so embarrassed, but they all started chiming in. Ooh, love those, want those. Well, that led to another friend that was on the group said, you've got to start selling those. Well, I've never liked selling anything because I feel like a fraud. I don't know why, but I just don't want to like promote myself or, I mean, if it's something else, I tried Arbonne for like a month and I crumbled and died. I just don't like the idea of like pushing something on someone.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, well, I guess I could just like sell them for a couple bucks. Well, my husband, being wise, said, look, I get it. The materials aren't that expensive, but it's your time. If you're going to be upstairs in the craft room while we're all trying to like have dinner and you're missing, could we maybe like, you could make some money so we could have carry out? And so we jokingly said, okay. So I threw them on Facebook. One October, it was a late October evening. It was actually Bedlam. We were watching the OUSU football game. I threw them on Facebook and said, hey, I'm selling these. There's like 5 options. Message me if you want some. And I sold like 65 pairs in an hour. It was nuts.
Gosh.
Yeah. So needless to say, that Christmas, my kids got everything on their list, including a dog. His mom had money to spend. I'm like, you want that? Really? Okay. So I came up with EB Designs overnight. I had a logo from my graphic design days, and I'm like, all right, we're going with it. And I mean, it's been such a gift from God. I've always said that God's the CEO and that prayer is my business model. And I'm glad about that right now during COVID-19 because I'm not stressed. I mean, we've been having a lot of fun with it, and it's not a passion. I will say if it crumbled tomorrow and all died, I'd be sad. But I have a passion to help women understand how to apply the gospel to their lives. And so if you get me talking about that, that's really my passion. But I do love making earrings. And when I'm working with my hands, I am happy. And it was a gift from God because I am a fitness instructor and I am go, go, go. And I didn't realize how much energy I had until I was told to stay home every day. But for the last 2.5 years or however long I've been doing EB Designs, I sit and I make earrings and I listen to podcasts and I listen to books. And I needed that. So God knew just what I needed. And we needed a little extra income. So that's been super fun.
Yeah. I love the story. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, Emily, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that. Tell us where to find you on the socials.
Social media. Well, like Emily Van Baker's my name. So that's me on Facebook. And I'm one of those girls, I actually like Facebook. So I don't ever give it up. I should probably, but then Instagram is just my EB Designs. It's Emily Baker, EB Designs, something like that. You can probably find me. And then I've got a Facebook EB Designs as well that's linked to that. And that's all I do. I mean, that's how you can find me.
Yeah, that's about all I am too. It's just too much. It's too much to do all that nonsense. Who has time for that? Especially when you're a one-man show, one-woman show. All right. Hey, girl, thank you so much. I'm going to let you go have that Coke.
Oh, I guess I should say I do have a website, theshopebdesigns.com. Okay. That's actually where you buy the earrings.
I probably would have caught that on the editing process.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, go to shopebdesigns.com.
I would love for you to buy earrings because we love to make them over here. And I hired 2 of my teenagers. So shop, SHOP, ebdesigns.com. And it's a one-girl show. So
yes. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. This has been a long, but it's so good. So I can't wait to go back and listen and take more notes. And I always love applying this stuff to my life. So thank you, Emily.
Oh, thank you, Amy, for having a podcast named Graced Health that combines 2 things I love, but I never thought how they connected. And so you've helped me connect dots for sure.
Oh, well, thanks. It's all God. That was not me. That was him. He's my CEO, like you said. Yes. All right, girl. Have a good day. I feel like we covered so much, and I know that was a long one, and yet there's so much we still could have covered. I mean, it's probably an unending conversation that could just cover so many areas. So thank you for spending that time with us. I hope it blessed you and enabled you, or maybe a better word is reminded you to give yourself grace in some areas and maybe give you a little bit deeper understanding of that. I know I have a lot of things to think about, figure out where I can apply in my life. And so I'm really just grateful for Emily's wisdom in that. I have to admit, I'm having a hard time coming up with the one simple thing for you to remember because there were so many just fabulous nuggets. But I think the one that is popping out to me as I look through my very thorough notes is that the opposite of grace is shame. Now, if you're anything like me, you probably listen to Brene Brown because she has been able to teach us and educate us so much on shame. And I really appreciate that connection that Emily made, that the opposite of grace is that. And I don't know about you, but I don't need any more shame in my life. And why would I put it on myself? And so why not accept the grace that was given to us freely by Jesus? I know we talked about a lot of different resources, recommendations, Bible verses, all of that. I'm going to have all of that in a link to the show notes at gracedhealth.com/Emily Baker Grace, all one word. So make sure you go check those out there. I'm going to try and find that picture of the 2 of us circa 1985, something like that. It's a great picture, and I wish I was closer to my mom so I could find a few more of the two of us, because we certainly have plenty, and we have such a long history, and I'm so grateful for that. Hey, if you can, make sure you rate and review this show. That means so much to me. I really appreciate particularly the reviews. Go to gracedhealth.com/podcast, and you can sign up for the show notes, and they will hit you directly in your inbox. I only send out things once a week, and when you do that, you will also get on my monthly newsletter list, which might be the most fun I have writing, because I write it in the early afternoon when I'm a little snarky and a little sassy, and I just have fun. And it needs editing, and the grammar's not great, but it's a lot of fun for me to write. So you'll get those monthly newsletters. You can't find them anywhere else. They're not online. They're for special people. Okay, you guys, that is it for today. Go out there and have a grace day.